My name is Laura, and I'm 32 years old. For the last 2 years of my mother's life, my world shrank to the size of her small bedroom. I was the one who held the cup to her lips when she was too weak to drink, the one who read to her for hours when the television became too confusing, and the one who woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of her pained breathing. My older sister, Chloe, the family's dazzling star, was too busy building her brand as a lifestyle influencer to be bothered with the messy reality of our mother's long, slow decline. My father, a man who has always mistaken peacekeeping for parenting, simply deferred to Chloe's more demanding schedule. The day before my mother passed, she grasped my hand with a surprising surge of strength. Her eyes were clear for the first time in weeks. "The hope chest," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "The one my father made. It's for you, Laura. Only you." "Don't talk like that, Mom," I'd said, my throat tight with tears. "No, listen," she insisted. "Chloe won't understand. To her, it's a prop. To you, it's our story. I made a video on my phone. The passcode is your birthday. Show them if you have to." I thought it was just the medication talking. I had no idea that this quiet deathbed promise would become the fuse that would ignite a war at her funeral, and that a simple video on a phone would be the only thing to protect me from the flames. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Before I tell you about the promise that divided my family, hit like and subscribe to hear more true stories about last wishes and the betrayals they can expose. My life before my mother's illness was quiet and unassuming. I managed a local community food bank, a job that was emotionally demanding but deeply fulfilling. My world was one of logistics, grant proposals, and the grateful smiles of the people we helped. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. Chloe's world, on the other hand, was all about glamour. At 36, she was a successful social media influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers who hung on her every post about authentic living, family heritage, and curated beauty. She lived with her equally successful husband in a restored farmhouse that looked like a magazine cover, a life she meticulously documented for her audience. Our family dynamic was a well-established solar system. Chloe was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets held in her gravitational pull. My father, a retired accountant, was always in awe of her confidence and charisma. He saw her ambition as a virtue and my quiet dedication to service as nice, but not important. When Mom got sick with cancer, the roles were assigned without discussion. Chloe lived 2 hours away and had a demanding brand to maintain. It fell to me, the single daughter living 20 minutes away, to become the primary caregiver. I moved into my childhood home, turning my life upside down. I cut my hours at the food bank, hired an assistant I couldn't really afford, and put my own life on hold. Chloe's contribution consisted of weekly care packages filled with expensive scented candles and organic juices that Mom couldn't stomach, all of which were carefully photographed for her Instagram stories with hashtags like family first and caring for Mom. She would visit once a month for a carefully staged 2-hour photo opportunity where she would read a chapter of a book to Mom, a pained expression of angelic concern on her face, before rushing off to a brand collaboration meeting. The hope chest sat at the foot of my mother's bed, as it always had. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, made of dark cherry wood, hand-carved with intricate designs by our great-grandfather. Inside, it held the artifacts of our family's female lineage: my great-grandmother's wedding veil, my grandmother's first baby shoes, my mother's christening gown. It was a treasure chest of memories, not money. To me, it was the most precious thing in the house. The day my mother made me that promise, I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew her older daughter all too well. She passed away the next afternoon, holding my hand. My father was a wreck, and Chloe immediately took charge, her grief manifesting as a flurry of hyper-efficient, aesthetic-driven planning. She was not just planning a funeral, she was producing an event. In the whirlwind of the days that followed my mother's death, Chloe was a director on a film set. "The flowers have to be white orchids. They're more elegant than roses," she'd said, already on the phone with the most expensive florist in town. My father, lost in his own fog of grief, just nodded at her every command. "And for the reception at the house, we need a caterer who does artisanal cheese boards. It's more on brand." I tried to interject. Mom loved Mrs. Gable's sandwiches from the church group. Chloe had cut me off with a dismissive wave. "Nobody wants to eat finger sandwiches on white bread. It's depressing. We need to celebrate her life, to make it beautiful." Her vision of a beautiful celebration seemed to be one that would look perfect on her social media feed. The first time she mentioned the hope chest, it was with a casual, proprietary air. We were in my mother's bedroom, supposedly sorting through her clothes for donation. Chloe, however, was mostly taking artistic photos of Mom's vintage perfume bottles for a future post. "I've been thinking the hope chest would look absolutely perfect in our entryway," she had mused, running a perfectly manicured finger over the carved wood. "It's such a powerful symbol of family history. It would be the centerpiece of my Heritage Home series." My heart sunk. A prop. That's all it was to her. "Mom left it to me, Chloe." I said it softly, not wanting to start a fight. Chloe turned to me and laughed, a light tinkling sound that held no humor. "Oh, Laura, don't be silly. She was on so much medication at the end. She didn't know what she was saying. Of course it comes to me as the eldest daughter. That's tradition." My father entered the room then, carrying a box. "What's about the chest?" he asked, looking nervously between us. "Laura is under the impression that Mom left her the oak chest," Chloe said, her tone dripping with pity for my apparent delusion. "I was just explaining that Mom was very confused in her final days." My father looked at me, his expression pleading. "Laura, let's not argue. Your sister is right. It's tradition for things to pass to the eldest. You know how much family heritage means to her." I stared at him, my own father, siding with her so easily and validating my mother's last wish to avoid a moment of conflict. He wasn't a villain. He was just a coward. "She was perfectly lucid when she told me," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "She knew exactly what she was doing." "Well, it's not in the will, is it?" Chloe challenged, crossing her arms. "The will just divides the financial assets. Personal items are left to the family to sort out, and we're sorting it out. I'm taking the chest after the funeral." She said it with such finality, as if the matter was closed. I didn't argue further. There was no point. They wouldn't listen to me. They would only listen to my mother. I clutched the secret of the video on her phone like a shield, knowing I might have to use it. The thought made me sick. Using my mother's dying words as a weapon felt like a betrayal of its own. But what other choice did they leave me? The day of the funeral was gray and overcast, a perfect reflection of my mood. The service was beautiful, of course. Chloe had made sure of it. The white orchids were everywhere, and a string quartet played softly in the background. Chloe delivered a eulogy that was a masterpiece of performance art. She cried in all the right places, her voice catching with emotion as she spoke of our mother's elegance and grace. She managed to weave in several mentions of her own brand and the importance of honoring our matriarchs, a phrase that sounded like it had been focus grouped. Several times during the service, I saw her discreetly checking her phone, no doubt monitoring the engagement on the posts she had scheduled to go live during the funeral. It was ghoulish. After the service, a crowd of friends and family returned to my parents' house for the reception. The artisanal cheese boards were, admittedly, beautiful. People mingled, sharing fond memories of my mother. I found myself accepting condolences from people who then immediately asked what it was like to be Chloe's sister. It was the story of my life. I kept an eye on the hope chest, which sat in its usual place in the living room. Chloe seemed to be deliberately avoiding it, playing the role of the gracious hostess, but I saw the way her eyes kept darting towards it, the way she positioned herself in conversation to be near it. She was waiting for her moment. That moment came about 2 hours into the reception. The crowd had thinned slightly. Chloe stepped into the center of the living room and tapped a wine glass with a spoon, the sharp chime cutting through the low hum of conversation. "Could I have everyone's attention for just a moment?" she asked, her voice imbued with a somber importance. My father stood beside her, looking on with proud, teary eyes. "Thank you all for coming today to celebrate the beautiful life of my mother," Chloe began, her voice trembling slightly for effect. "As many of you know, family heritage and tradition were everything to her. She taught us to cherish the stories and the objects that connect us to our past." She gestured dramatically towards the hope chest. "This chest was built by our great-grandfather. It has been passed down through the women in our family for generations. It holds our history. In keeping with that tradition, as the eldest daughter, I will be taking this piece into my home to be its guardian for the next generation." She looked around the room, her gaze sweeping over the nodding, sympathetic faces of our relatives. "I will cherish it as a daily reminder of my mother's legacy, a legacy I try to honor every day in my own work." She then turned to her husband. "Mark, darling, could you and Dad help me move it to the car now? I want to make sure it's transported safely." The audacity of it was breathtaking. She was going to have them carry it out of the house right then and there, in front of everyone, cementing her claim through an act of public possession. People started to murmur their approval. "How lovely," I heard my great-aunt say. "It's right that it should go to Chloe." My father and Mark started to move towards the chest. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. My mother's dying wish was about to be bulldozed by Chloe's public relations campaign. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a cold, clear anger that burned away my grief. "Stop." My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room with the force of a command. Everyone turned to look at me. Chloe's serene mask faltered, a flash of irritation in her eyes. "Laura, not now," my father said, his voice a low warning. "Now is the only time," I replied, standing up and walking to the center of the room to face my sister. "The hope chest is not yours, Chloe. Mom left it to me." A collective gasp went through the room. Chloe adopted a look of deep, sorrowful pity. "Oh, honey, we talked about this. Mom was very confused at the end. She loved you, of course, but she wasn't in her right mind." "She was perfectly in her right mind," I said, my voice gaining strength. "And she knew you would do this. She knew you would twist her words and steamroll Dad. She knew you cared more about the prop than the promise." "That is a cruel and horrible thing to say on the day of our mother's funeral," Chloe cried, her voice rising in theatrical outrage. Several relatives started to murmur in agreement, casting disapproving looks in my direction. I was being painted as the heartless, greedy sister, creating a scene at my own mother's wake. "You're right," I said. "It is horrible, and I wouldn't be doing this if you had given me any other choice. But you're not going to take her last wish and turn it into a piece of content for your brand." "This is absurd," Chloe said, turning to my father for support. "Dad, do something." My father looked at me, his face a mess of anguish and indecision. "Laura, please just let it go. For your mother's sake, let's not fight." "You think this is what she would have wanted?" I challenged him. "For her dying wish to be ignored to make Chloe happy?"
I looked around at the faces of my family, all of them ready to believe Chloe's version, the version that maintained the family hierarchy they were all comfortable with. I took a deep breath. My mother's words echoed in my head. Show them if you have to.
Actually, I said, my voice suddenly calm, we don't have to guess what she wanted. She told us. I walked over to the large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. I took out my phone, my hands surprisingly steady. What are you doing? Chloe asked, a note of genuine alarm in her voice for the first time. A few days before she died, Mom was worried that her wishes might be misinterpreted, I explained, as I connected my phone to the TV's smart hub. So she decided to make a record of them. The room was silent with anticipation. A moment later, the screen flickered to life, and there was my mother. She was propped up in her bed, looking frail and tired, but her eyes were unmistakably clear, the focus sharp and intelligent. The video was shaky, clearly self-recorded. Hello? Her voice, weak but firm, filled the living room. If you are watching this, it means I'm gone, and there is probably some disagreement about my things. I'm making this video to be perfectly clear, with no confusion. She took a sip of water and looked directly into the camera. Chloe stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. My father looked like he was going to be sick. My mother continued. My financial assets are to be divided as stated in my will, but there is one thing that is very important to me, the hope chest, the one my father, your grandfather, built with his own hands. She paused, taking a breath. Chloe, my beautiful, ambitious girl, I am so proud of the life you have built, but I know you, darling. You see the world through a lens of beauty and image. That chest to you is a beautiful object, a piece of family history that fits your brand, and that's okay, but it is not what the chest is about. She then turned her head slightly, as if looking at someone just off camera. Laura, she said, and her voice softened, a wave of love and weariness washing through it. You gave me the greatest gift these last 2 years, the gift of your time, of your life. You put your future on hold to care for me, and you never once complained. You have a caregiver's soul. Tears were streaming down my face now, silent and hot. She paused, taking a breath, and looked directly into the camera. The hope chest is not about image, she said, her gaze returning to the camera. It's about care. It's about the quiet, unseen work that women in our family have always done to hold things together. My grandmother cared for the veil, my mother cared for the shoes, and I have cared for it all. Now I am passing that responsibility to the one who has cared for me. The hope chest belongs to Laura. It is my final wish, and it is not negotiable. The video ended. The screen went black. For a full minute, no one moved or spoke. The only sound was my own quiet sniffle. Then the whispers started. The guests who had been ready to condemn me moments before were now looking at Chloe with expressions of shock and pity. The public performance had been upstaged by a quiet, inassailable truth. Chloe's face was ashen. Her husband, Mark, put a hand on her arm, but she shook it off. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a furious, humiliated hatred. Without a word, she turned and stalked out of the house. Mark hesitated, then followed her. My father sank into a nearby chair, burying his face in his hands. The spell was broken. Guests began to quietly make their excuses, murmuring condolences to me as they left, their eyes avoiding my father. One by one, they filed out until it was just me and him.
alone in the living room with the catering platters and the silent, solid presence of the hope chest.
My father sat in that chair for a long time, not speaking. I began the quiet work of cleaning up, gathering plates and glasses, a familiar role for me in the wake of family chaos. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was heavy with the weight of everything unsaid for years. I'm a coward, Laura, he finally said, his voice muffled by his hands. I stopped what I was doing, but didn't respond. It wasn't an accusation I needed to deny. All my life, I've just gone along, he continued, looking up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. Chloe was always so bright and demanding. It was just easier to give her what she wanted. And you never asked for anything. You were so strong, so self-sufficient. I took that for granted. I used your strength as an excuse for my weakness. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. I just wanted to keep the peace, he whispered. Sometimes, Dad, peace is just what it looks like when everyone is afraid to tell the truth, I said, echoing a sentiment my grandmother had once written in her journal. He nodded slowly, accepting the painful wisdom of that. Your mother knew, he said. She knew Chloe would do this, and she knew I wouldn't be strong enough to stop her. That video, it wasn't just for Chloe. It was for me. It was her way of being strong for you one last time. The thought broke my heart all over again, but it also filled me with a profound sense of my mother's love. She had seen me, truly seen me, and had done everything in her power to protect me. The fallout from that day was swift and decisive. Chloe's brand took a major hit. Several of the guests at the reception were influential members of our community, and the story of her behavior at her own mother's funeral spread like wildfire. A popular local blogger wrote a thinly veiled post about the dark side of influencer authenticity, and Chloe's follower count, her lifeblood, began to drop for the first time in her career. She and Mark went on a digital detox trip to Bali, a classic influencer move to escape a scandal. She sent me a single, furious text before she left. I hope you and that chest are very happy together. You've destroyed our family. I didn't reply. She was wrong. She hadn't destroyed the family. She had just exposed what it had been all along. A fragile structure built on avoidance and unequal dynamics. My relationship with my father began a slow, awkward process of rebuilding. He started calling me, not to ask for anything, but just to talk. He asked about my work at the food bank. He asked about my plans for the garden. He asked how I was really doing. He started to show up, bringing me groceries, helping me with repairs around the cottage that had become my permanent home. One day, he brought over a small, handcrafted wooden box. I made this, he said, his voice hesitant. It's not as good as your great-grandfather's work, but I thought you could use it to store your mother's letters. It was a clumsy, beautiful peace offering, and I accepted it. We were finding a new way to be a father and daughter, one that wasn't based on old roles and expectations. One evening, I finally opened the hope chest. It smelled of cedar and lavender and thyme. I carefully lifted out the heirlooms one by one, the delicate lace of the wedding veil, the tiny worn leather of the baby shoes, the soft, yellowed cotton of the christening gown. At the very bottom, tucked beneath a layer of tissue paper, was a thick leather-bound album. It wasn't a photo album. It was a scrapbook my mother had kept. It was filled with things from my life, my first A+ spelling test, a pressed corsage from my high school prom, the program for my college graduation, newspaper clippings about the food bank's charity drives. She had kept everything. Tucked into the final page was a letter in her familiar handwriting. For my Laura, it began, I know I wasn't always the mother you deserved. I let myself be carried along by the stronger currents in our family, but I want you to know, in the quiet moments, you were the one who brought me the most peace. Your strength,
your kindness, your steady heart, they were my anchor. This hope chest isn't a reward, my love. It's a responsibility. It's filled with the stories of women who were stronger than they appeared. Now, it's your turn to add your own story. Make it a good one.
6 months after the funeral, life had settled into a new, quiet rhythm. The cottage, once a place of caregiving and grief, had become my sanctuary. I had finally taken the time to restart my landscape architecture career, taking on small local projects that allowed me to work from home. The wild coastal garden became my canvas, and I found a deep, healing joy in bringing new life to the soil my grandmother had tended for so long. My father was a regular visitor. Our weekly dinners became a comfortable tradition. We talked about his life, about my mother, about the things we had never been able to say before. He was a different man, humbled and more thoughtful. He had started volunteering at the food bank twice a week, a quiet act of penance and a genuine attempt to understand my world. He never spoke of Chloe, and I never asked. I did, however, hear about her. Her digital detox had ended, and she had returned to social media with a new, toned-down brand focused on healing and self-discovery. Her posts were full of vague platitudes about overcoming personal challenges and the importance of letting go of toxic narratives. It was a clever rebranding, but I knew it was just another performance. She had never reached out to me or my father with a genuine apology. Her healing was just another form of content. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was sitting on the porch, sketching a design for a new garden bed, when a package was delivered. There was no return address. Inside, I found a small antique silver locket. It was one of my mother's, one that Chloe had always admired. There was a short, unsigned note in Chloe's perfect calligraphic script. "Tradition is for the eldest." For a moment, I felt the flash of the old anger. It was a passive-aggressive jab, a final petty claim to what she felt was her birthright. She couldn't have the chest, so she had taken the locket from my mother's jewelry box before she left. But as I looked at the locket, the anchor faded and was replaced by a profound sadness. This was all she understood. Objects, status, tradition. She couldn't grasp the value of the intangible things my mother had truly left me. Her stories, her quiet strength, her love. Chloe could have the locket. I had the legacy. I placed the locket inside the hope chest, alongside the other family heirlooms. It was part of the story now, too. A reminder of a bond that was broken, and of a choice that had to be made. The chest wasn't just a collection of old things. It was a testament to the fact that family isn't about who is the loudest or the brightest. It's about who shows up to do the quiet, necessary work of caring. My mother had asked me to add my own story to the chest. That day, I wrote a long letter to her, telling her everything that had happened. I told her about Dad, about Chloe, and about the foundation I was starting in her name to support family caregivers. I folded the letter and placed it inside the chest, on top of her scrapbook. My story was now part of the legacy. It wasn't the one I would have chosen, but it was real, and it was mine. Have you ever had to fight for something sentimental against a family member? What do you believe is more important, tradition or a person's final wishes? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories about the complex, beautiful, and often painful realities of family. Remember that sometimes the most valuable heirlooms are not objects, but the lessons and the love they represent. Thank you for listening.